Good evening and welcome to installment 2 of the Kuhn Academy. We're continuing on with the discussion of the Constitutional Convention. Now in video 1, you saw the debate between the large and the small states over representation in the legislature. So the problem of solving that was eventually done with, pause your video. That's correct, the Great Compromise. All right, now your book is also going to call it the Connecticut Compromise, only because it was worked out by a guy named Roger Sherman from Connecticut. All right, so Connecticut Compromise, Great Compromise, it's the same thing. It's basically what created our House and Senate and established our legislature. All right. Now, one of the houses was the House of Representatives. So what is the purpose of the House of Representatives? Go ahead and pause your video, read the choices. The correct answer is D. Okay, the House is there to represent the majority because it is chosen by the voters and it is based on population. All right, so the House is there for the majority. Now, we kind of call this, some political scientists refer to the House and Senate as the cup and the saucer. Okay, the House being the cup where you put the hot legislation, the passionate legislation, the whims of the majority, what everybody's excited about. And then it spills over into the saucer, which is what the Senate is, where it cools down and the minority can look at it. And by minority, I don't mean, blacks and Latinos, but I mean the states, where people are more represented equally. Okay, so the Senate's like the saucer where the legislation cools, and the House is where it is passed to represent the majority. All right, so we've already seen here. I'm gonna go to full screen for you. All right. So with the Great Compromise, we saw the problem was how many votes a state had in Congress. Okay, large states wanted a population, small states wanted equal. So the Connecticut Compromise offered a bicameral legislature. So we're going to stick with the two houses from the Virginia plan. However, the Senate is going to be equal in representation. They're going to have 2 votes per state in the Senate. And then the representation in the House is going to be based on population, all right? And it was actually 1 for every 60,000 people initially, okay, when they proposed it. I think your book says 30,000, but that was the proposal in the Virginia plan. But it's 1 per 60 initially because that was the population of the smallest state being Delaware, okay? So that's how we're going to get our House and Senate and get the legislative branch established. Now, once we decide we're going to base it on population, now we got a problem with slaves, all right? How are we going to count slaves in the population? Southern states said that slaves should count. After all, they're people and they live there, but they didn't want to be taxed for them, all right, even though they argued they were property. Northern states said that they should be taxed but not represented. So the 3/5 compromise was worked out where they were going to count 3 out of every 5 slaves. Now, this is significant, obviously for population purposes, but more significantly because it introduces slavery into the Constitution. It doesn't say the word slavery. It says 3/5 of all other persons after they rattle off, all the people that were counted in the population. So they don't want to use the word slavery, but they do account for them in the Constitution as 3/5. All right. And what's interesting is when we eventually outlaw slavery with the 13th Amendment, it's actually going to give more power to the southern states because now the southern states are going to have their slaves count as full people. So it's kind of weird how the Civil War is about weakening the power of the South, and in a weird way it increased it. All right, which of the following is a power that is unique to the Senate? By unique, I mean it's a power only the Senate has. Okay, let's see if we can know this one. Go ahead and pause your video. And the correct answer is B, approve treaties made by the president, okay? And that's done with a 2/3 vote in the Senate, what we call a super majority. Okay, super majority vote in the Senate. All these other powers are powers of the House except for E, okay? So the Senate is going to have powers that are more for the educated and the elite because our requirements to be in the Senate are going to be older. You have to be 30 to be in the Senate as opposed to 25 in the House. And also powers we want to keep removed from the people. We don't want the people ratifying treaties. We want this educated elite senators that are more experienced doing something like that. All right. Why did Northerners oppose slavery at the convention? This is more of a history question, but slavery does get introduced there. So the correct answer was it increased Southern political power, okay, because it was more representation. Even though it was 3/5, They were still getting representatives for something that they that really wasn't being represented that way. Okay, so the next big issue pertaining to slavery that's going to come up is sorry about that, involving the slave trade. All right, the people opposed to slavery wanted to see the slave trade abolished, not for moral purposes. There was really no moral argument about slavery at the convention. It was commonly accepted pretty much throughout the states. The bigger issue was, if you continue to allow the slave trade to continue from Africa, you're going to allow more people in the country, and that's going to increase the southern population. So they agreed that there would be no importation after 1808, but slavery would continue. And the actual wording in the Constitution says that no amendment can be introduced to outlaw the slave trade until 1808. So sure enough, January 1st, 1808, Congress introduces a proposal to ban the slave trade. Okay, so basically for 20 years, the slave trade will continue, and it's going to continue after that too. But they did agree to outlaw that. Okay, then on the flip side of that compromise was a tariff on or compromise on tariffs. Okay, because Southerners were exporters, they did not want to see exports taxed. Okay. And they didn't want to see imports taxed either, or tariffs on their exports, because this was their livelihood and what they were selling. Okay, the business interests wanted this protective tariff, which were mostly up in the north, to protect them from foreign competition. So what they agreed to is there would be no tax on exports. Okay, so anything leaving this country can never be taxed by the federal government, but we can tax imports, okay, anything brought in. So, and we still have arguments about that today with free trade and tariffs and stuff like that. So tariffs a big issue then, also a big issue today. All right, and these compromises go together. Okay, no slave trade after 1808. That's going to hurt the South a little bit, but then the South doesn't get their exports taxed, only the imports. Okay. And there's also a little side note in this compromise that you couldn't tax the importation of slaves for anything more than $10 a head. So think about $10 back then. That's a lot of money. All right, and our final compromise, as we wrap things up here, was about the presidency. All right, they weren't sure what kind of executive they wanted. They did want a single executive. They agreed on that, and they needed to limit him, so they agreed to a 4-year term for the presidency. Okay, so they would have 4-year term for the president. They could serve unlimited 4-year terms as long as they continue to be reelected. All right. Now we know, oh, I thought we can only serve 2. That's why Obama's done. Thank God I didn't say that. That does not come in until the 22nd Amendment, which is in 1951, after FDR serves 4 terms. Okay, so there was no limit placed at that time. The reason 2 terms was became the precedent was because of what George Washington did. And they were going to use an indirect election system called the Electoral College. All right, we'll talk a lot about that throughout the term. But the idea here, the way it works today is different than the way it was supposed to work back then, but the main point here is that the people would not be directly electing the president. There would be electors chosen to do that. And those electors were chosen back then by the state legislatures. They still are today, but a little different method as to how they choose them. All right, so that wraps things up here for the Kuhn Academy. Okay, thank you for listening today, and we are building responsible voters one video at a time. See you tomorrow. Stacking them, babe.